When we're adding and subtracting mixed numbers, we're going to start the same way as we do when we're multiplying and dividing them. We're going to convert them to improper fractions. So if I have 1 7/8 plus 3 1/2, first I do the multiply and then the add. So 8 times 1 is 8, plus 7 more is 15. So we have 15/8 plus, now we convert the 3 1/2. So we have 2 times 3, and then plus 1. That's 6 plus 1 is 7. And we leave the denominator the same. So we have 15/8 plus 7/2. What makes adding and subtracting harder than multiplying and dividing is you need what is called a common denominator. What that means is we need both of these denominators to be the same before we can add or subtract them together. So I need to find what number I can turn both of these denominators into for them to match. And that seems a little weird, but it'll work. Trust me. So right now, I need to find a number that I can divide by 8 and I can divide by 2. The safe way that will always, always, always work is you can multiply these two together. 8 times 2 is 16. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of these fractions and write them as a fraction over 16. So let's start with 15/8. I want to write it as some fraction over 16. I want it to have the same value, I just want it to have 16 in the denominator. So how do we get from 8 to 16? We multiply by 2. If I do that to the denominator, I also need to do that to the numerator so that it stays equal. 15 times 2 is 30. So 15/8 is equal to 30 over 16. We're going to do the same thing to 7/2. I want to write 7/2 as some fraction over 16. How do we get from 2 to 16? We multiply by 8. So I'm going to do that in the numerator as well. 7 times 8 is 56. So now I'm going to take my new fractions and put them in place of the old ones. 15/8 is equal to 30 over 16. And we're going to add that to 7/2, which is equal to 56 over 16. Now that they have the same denominator, I add them together. When you're adding and subtracting, you leave the denominator the same. That part doesn't change. We just add the numerators together. 30 plus 56 is 86. Let's see if this reduces at all. Well, they're both even, so I can divide them both by 2. That'll get us to 43 over 8. I could try dividing by 2 or 3 or 4, but they won't both divide at the same time. So we're looking at 43/8, and now we need to convert that back to a mixed number. How many times does 8 go all the way into 43? Well, we know 8 times maybe 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 is 48. I don't have that many, so I need to stop here. 8 times 5 is 40. So it goes in 5 full times. If I'm only using 40 of the 43, how many do I have left over? 3 more, and that denominator is 8. So when we add those together, we get 5 3/8. Now let's try one with subtracting. We have 3 3/4 minus 1 2/5. So let's start by converting them. into our improper fractions. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 3 is 15. So we have 15 fourths minus, we got to convert this one too, 5 times 1, and then we're going to add 2. That's 5 plus 2 is 7 over 5. Now when we're adding and subtracting, we have to have a common denominator first. So right now we're looking at 15 fourths minus 7 fifths. For a common denominator, what always works is if you multiply them together. 4 times 5, which is 20. So we're going to take both of these fractions and change them into fractions that have a denominator of 20. So 15 fourths, we want to make equal to a fraction out of 20. How do we get from 4 to 20? We multiply by 5. So we're also going to take our numerator and multiply it by 5. 15 times 5 is 75. Now we're going to take our 7 fifths and write it as a fraction out of 20. How do we get from 5 to 20? We multiply by 4. So we're also going to do that to our numerator. 7 times 4 is 28. I'm going to rewrite my two fractions in their new forms. So I have 75 twentieths minus 28 twentieths. Remember, we leave the denominators the same, and then we subtract our numerators. 75 minus 28 is 47. We could try to reduce it, but it's not going to work. How many times does 20 go all the way into 47? Well, that's going to be twice, because that gets us up to 40. How many is left over if we're using 40 of them? 7 of them. So it leaves us with 2 and 7/20.